and gentlemen, welcome to another great episode of The Stoop, where we talk hoops, and more hoops. I'm your guy, TJ, minus my guy, Kev P. But you know, Kev P's always here in the midst somewhere, man. His aura is always with us. But listen, before we get into it, I want to say thank you to everybody who likes, subscribes, shares episodes, catches us on all the platforms via podcast, or actually watches the show on YouTube as well. With that being said, I got to shout out and say salute to my sponsors. Boom, first up, you see it? Got it right there. Boom. There you go. 24/7 Sports. We got our official basketball with the Stoop logo in there. Listen, if you need a basketball for your official tournament, league, whatever you got going on, summer's coming up soon. So hopefully everybody gets vaccinated. You can play some ball. Hit up my guy Dave at 24/7. And listen, if you want something just like me that's nice and smooth, Yave is the key. It comes in regular. It's an agave flavor that's amazing. You can cook it with some jalapenos. Also, it got a great mango flavor. Shout out to my guy Joe. Shout out to my guy Ron, one of our official sponsors also for season 5. Got that out of the way. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is a pleasure to have my special guest on the show today. She's like, it's like family. It's like old times. This Georgetown alum is really, really taking off. She's written for the likes of the Wall Street Journal, the USA Today. And I believe now she's also a Columbia grad student in journalism too. Is that correct, Miss Amanda?
Yeah, I got a Master's of Science from Columbia Journalism School. Very fancy, I know.
Okay. So we're going to throw that in there too. And now she's with Front Office Sports. Ladies and gentlemen, my illustrious guest today is Miss Amanda Christovich. Amanda, my angel, thank you for coming up. Listen, getting right to it. So we started talking and giving a little background story. And my man V, shout out V, shout out to all my angels. Shout out, I love you guys. I miss you guys. We were talking about you and just how you got into this whole thing of journalism. So I want you to explore that because I wanted to ask, what came first for you, the chicken or the egg, or your love of sports or your love of journalism? So how'd that go for you?
Yeah, so the short version of the story is that I grew up a huge sports fan. I actually played boys baseball, like growing up in Little League in Los Angeles. And basically around when I got to high school, they were like, okay, well, you're a woman, so like you can't play baseball anymore. So either play softball or find a different sport. And that grew a very large chip on my shoulder because I did not want to leave sports. I ran track, et cetera, but I basically was like, how can I stay in sports if I'm not allowed to play them, or men's sports in particular? And I always liked writing. And so journalism was something that I started to explore. And when I was in college, I did some journalism internships. I also worked for the athletic department at Georgetown, which is where I was part of TJ's Angels, doing social media. And, you know, like I really loved that. It was, you know, because it's storytelling too, right? Right. You know, but when I graduated, I just said like, okay, I was going to the Wall Street Journal to intern there. I got gotten into Columbia. I was like, let's just see if we can make the journalism thing work. And then the pandemic hit, but fortunately, so I graduated from like my couch in May. Congrats, and literally I have a cap and gown that I've never worn. Like it's in my closet and I've never worn it, but I had the Georgetown graduation, which is the important one. So it's fine. Absolutely. And then I ended up getting really lucky and getting this job at Front Office Sports. And this is where I've been ever since.
Absolutely. So let's really get into this. So we know there's a big disparity between men and women when it comes to sports, when it comes to journalism, or just media as a whole. It seems like even in 2021 that women are still placed in certain boxes that I think by now we should have outgrown. We've seen some of the things, and we're going to get into the NCAA more deeply, but what are some of the things that you faced initially when you began to open up these doors and get into sports journalism as a young woman?
Well, personally, you know, like I said, growing up, there was just a lot of like surprise that I was interested in sports at all, which looking back, like, I don't really understand because now I know so many women in the industry. But you know, it was this sort of thing where like guys would have Super Bowl parties and like not invite me. And I like watched sports with my parents and like a couple friends growing up who also like sports, but like no one, you know, none of the guys like wanted to hang out with them or whatever. In the industry, I think I've been pretty lucky, to be honest with you. I certainly haven't experienced some of the worst horror stories that you hear, whether it be about, you know, disrespect or some of the even worse things, you know. But I will say that like there's always this, you're always looking over your shoulder. You're always wondering, you know, if I make a mistake, is someone going to say Amanda made a mistake because she made a mistake? Or is it Amanda made a mistake because she's a woman and nobody should hire her or read her stuff or any of that? And so that like doesn't really ever go away, despite people who have been super supportive, like Vaughn, for example, you know, and really created an environment for me where like there was no one on the outside making me feel that way. So that never really goes away. I mean, maybe it will, but I'm trying to think of like any particular instances that I can give you. It's really just, it's implicit these days.
Got you.
You know, people say things, you know, they expect you to be begging for a job with them. And, you know, if you conduct yourself like a man and you're not, you know, goody two shoes and begging and yes, please, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, like, you know, they're a little, sometimes people are taken aback. And I guess the only other thing I'll say is I'm a very blunt person, as you know.
Yes, you are.
I say what I'm thinking. I say what I mean. And, you know, for women, that doesn't always work so well. Obviously, you know, there's a separate disparity where it's even worse for Black women, where if you speak your mind, you're like really attacked. But I've definitely experienced some of that. But, you know, I really I've been quite lucky in my career so far. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've been sitting at the table with you and shout out to my angels again, but you and Anish and then talking to Lauren and talking to Casey, like you four kept the two of us, me and V, in check. Like, it's like, we really like listen to you guys. And I know really I listen to y'all because I had to go all the way around the arena and like, if it wasn't for y'all, I'd be lost. So I think people don't realize how important a woman's voice is. And I realize that even in sports nowadays, some of our women, we just don't give the right perception of, and we don't give them enough kudos and enough light. And that's why I think it's important that we sit down and chat today. So let me talk more about basketball, because a year ago, all sports were pretty much in a bubble, especially when it came to professional basketball. And the men had so much fame and light about what they were doing in the bubble. Meanwhile, the ladies had a bigger impact, a bigger toll. They really shut a lot of things down. Heck, they had bullet holes on their shirt. Is that one of those things too, that's still a catch-22 as ladies versus men? Or is that we just didn't want to pay enough attention to what they were saying?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with the NBA and the WNBA, like activism in particular, I mean, look, the WNBA is finally starting to get their due, right? But they, you know, they haven't for so many years. When I was growing up, nobody told me to watch the Sparks, even though they were literally in my backyard, right? Yeah. For example. And their activism, you know, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on that, but like they've been speaking out for racial justice, for social justice in general for, you know, more than a decade. Yeah. You know, and if you look at what the Atlanta Dream did with electing Senator Warnock, like there's very specific political data that suggests that their activism, their Vote Warnock shirts, you know, really like helped seriously like swayed the election, right? Yes. And so finally, when that happened, they're starting to get their due, right? But even when, you know, the NBA shut down that day, you know, people were writing stories about, oh, the players are doing this. And it was really, it was really moving, you know, but again, the WNBA sometimes get lost because they've just been doing it for so long and they're so open about it too. You know, like you can go up to a player in a locker room and just ask their opinions on politics, and you can't necessarily do that for the NBA players all the time.
Right. So let's talk about that, Amanda, because let's be clear, for the last year and some change, the world's been in a shutdown and pandemic is pretty much taking sports away, but we're slowly starting to get back into the process where we can enjoy sports as fans, and also enjoy sports from a journalism perspective. But let me ask you this, moving forward with social distancing and things like Zoom calls and things like that, what do you think, like, and how are you guys preparing in the journalism industry and sports? How do you have conversations now moving forward? What does that look like? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't get super upset about phone interviews because, especially on the investigative side, I had a professor once who said to me, you know, if someone can't see your face and they're on the phone with you, sometimes they're like more willing to give you deeper information because they're less intimidated by like the face-to-face contact.
Right.
But I mean, but again, like most stories, there's no comparison to being in person. I haven't been to a game in person in a really long time. I should be in San Antonio or Indianapolis or one of the two covering these tournaments live, and I'm not. I'm in my apartment in New York City.
Yeah.
And that is very difficult. I'm literally calling people being like, what did you eat for breakfast today? And people are like, why? I thought you wanted to talk to me about basketball. Like, why? And I'm like, literally, because the readers want to know what you're eating in the bubble, and I'm not there. So I have to ask you, and I'm asking all these like weird questions. And I hope that changes. The one thing that many journalists are concerned isn't going to change is post-game access and pre-game access, right? So like being able to go into a locker room and basically like loiter and like in some cases, like not accost players, but just like have unplanned conversations with them, especially in baseball. That is like really at the heart of what beat writers do, right? And so right now it's all on Zoom, especially in college. They pick a player, they put the player on Zoom, you ask your questions, the player leaves. There's no, it's way more controlled. And people are worried that is never going to go back to locker room access is dead forever. I can't make a prediction, but it would be unfortunate if that were the case.
Yeah. I can only imagine what credentials are going to look like. Maybe they'll be limited, not as many people going in the locker rooms and those those closed spaces, keep numbers down, which is going to be interesting. But you brought up something. Let's talk about the bubble now. The buzz topic, the thing that's been having the world going in a frenzy for the last week and a half is the disparity between what that men's basketball weight room look like versus the ladies. So I got a two-part question for you. All right. The first one is, what was your take on that? And the second one is, the NCAA hasn't really gotten it right yet. And I'll say it, and I work for several different NCAA entities in college sports. I do. But the NCAA just hasn't gotten it right. So what was your opinion on that? And then where do they go from here to learn and build? What do they do?
Great questions. So my take on it is that anyone who is surprised hasn't been paying attention.
Absolutely.
And like Muffet McGraw said it better than I ever could in a statement that she put out. But she basically was like, look, this has been happening since, and a sports historian told me this too, since literally the creation of Title IX, like in the 70s, when women were finally allowed to play organized sports, like this has been happening. The men's sports are the first priority and the women's sports are the second priority. The women are just happy to be here. The women are grateful for the opportunity, right? Yeah. And so the weight room, what was interesting to me was that was the first thing that came out of all this, because it was like a physical disparity that you could see. But something that I wrote about today that I thought was a bigger deal was the fact that the men and the women are using different types of COVID tests. The men have more accurate COVID tests than the women.
Ooh.
Yeah, so the men have PCR tests, which are the ones where like they stick it all the way up your nose and like it takes a couple days. That's like what experts call the gold standard.
Right.
The women have the rapid tests, which are good and they're better than they were a few months ago, but they're not the gold standard. And the question is, if the men needed the PCR tests, why didn't the women need them, right? Right. Wow. So that's something that I've been trying to report out since February. Like I've been asking the NCAA since February. You haven't specified what kind of tests the women's players are getting, but you specified what kind the men's players are getting.
So is it no comment or they're not picking up your call? Which one is it?
So the first email I sent, they responded by referring me to their press release that didn't have the question in the press, or the answer to my question in the press release. Then I followed up the next morning. I believe it was the next morning, within 24 hours, and they just didn't respond, which is the NCAA's favorite thing to do, by the way, is just not respond.
That's a hustle move. Yep.
So, this was February. I was reporting out other things, but I was keeping it in the back of my mind. And then a report surfaced on Friday as this firestorm about the weight room is happening.
Right.
A report surfaces on Twitter that women's teams are getting a bunch of false positives because they're using these rapid tests. So I'm like, maybe I was right. So I emailed them again, and I'm like, just following up on this, like, can you confirm what kind of tests the women are using? No response. But it didn't matter, because 2 hours later, on a press conference that I was listening into, Gino Auriemma, the coach of UConn women's basketball,
right,
like, just confirmed. He was like, yeah, we knew from the beginning the women weren't getting the same tests as the men, and nobody told us why, but that's just the way it is. And so this has been like a saga for me personally for like over a month, trying to get the answer to this question.
I bet.
And then I'll raise you one more.
Go ahead. I'm loving this, because this is going to make front page news for us. Go ahead.
So then 3 reporters, or 3 outlets who were at the tournament, I believe it was the men's tournament where NCAA president Mark Emmer was hanging out, basically accosted him, and they were like, look, we got to ask you about this.
Yeah.
And he basically apologized for the weight room issue, the food issue. But for some reason, the buck stopped with the testing. And he was like, no, health experts have assured me that all of our plans are safe.
Wow.
And we're just like, okay, well, maybe they're safe, but there's clearly a reason the men are getting PCR tests. Clearly somebody believes that that's worth it. So
Absolutely.
Why isn't it worth it for the women? And that's a question the NCAA won't answer.
You know, I seen him at the game, and I was looking, and I heard him take care of the food and take care of the weight room. And I don't know if you've seen this today, but they put out a statement saying at the conclusion of the tournament, he's going to have like a student athlete task force to talk about things in which they can get better. I think it's a little late for that, bro. You had this tournament on your calendar for how long? And you had specialists and people on staff and a special force that was designated to put things together in these bubbles for our student athletes, coaches, and staffs. But it just looks so crazy that one side looked totally different than the other side. And not only that, like a farce different, like it was just totally bad. And it was like, oh, it's a situation of space. You seen the space was just like mirror.
There was an empty room. There was like a full empty room.
Like, to see, like, Amanda, to see some of the women's faces, to see their jubilant faces of being happy that the weight room changed. Like, I was happy for them, but I was like, but you should have had that in the very beginning. You should have.
Well, and that's something that I like experienced growing up as a female athlete, right? Like all through like growing up playing baseball, it was, you should be happy to be here. It's a privilege for you to be playing with these boys on this field. It doesn't matter if somebody says something inappropriate to you, which by the way, they did at literally in 7th grade. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And it's like, you are sitting there going, okay, I'm conditioned to just think that I should be grateful rather than, you know, and that asking for equality is asking for too much, right?
Yes.
And that's obviously like a theme everywhere in society right now, is that asking for basic decency is asking for too much, right?
Be quiet, don't say anything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, and to answer your second question about what I think they should do to change, I think task forces and I think internal investigations pay a lot of lip service. And I think people are going to write about those things. But what I really think is that, you know, and it's difficult because the NCAA isn't really beholden to anyone. They don't have to follow Title IX laws. They're not liable for Title IX.
They're so autonomous.
Right. They, you know, they have legislatures and Congress breathing down their neck for name, image, and likeness stuff. But usually Title IX is like not really enforced even at the school level very well. So they're really not beholden to anyone. But somebody has to figure out who in the institution of the NCAA made these decisions, right? Was it part of Mark Emmert's team, as South Carolina women's coach Don Staley suggested, or was it one of the committees that was actually made up of school officials themselves? Because people are blaming the NCAA, but it's not like the individual schools are innocent either. I mean, coaches all over the women's tournament have been talking about, look, this happens on our campuses too. It's not just at the NCAA level. So that needs to be determined and then changed. And then the other thing that, you know, some experts have floated to me, one in particular, said, you know, like, it's possible that the entire institution of the NCAA is just set up to fail women. Women's sports like didn't, they weren't always part of the NCAA, and they joined later on, and they certainly have benefited in a million ways. But at the end of the day, women's sports in the NCAA have always been second rate. They've always been, you know, the afterthought. And so I think some people, you know, especially like in, I guess, the academic community are saying, like, is this structure like fixable? And that's not a question I can answer, but it's certainly a question I'm asking, and a lot of people are too.
Listen, you have a super amazing mind, but your super amazing mind has put you with some of the most amazing publications that we know of. What was it like when you either got that email or that phone call that you were going to be brought on board to these two places, the Wall Street Journal and the USA Today? I'm just curious, like, what was in your mind? Did you celebrate, or were you like, oh my God, like what happened? So tell me, I got to hear the story. Come on, tell us.
So the story with USA Today, actually, so it was, I did the internship before my senior year.
Okay.
So junior year, I was abroad that first semester. I was in Prague, in the Czech Republic, studying abroad. And I was actually visiting a friend who was in Budapest. So I was even farther east. Yeah. I'm literally in Budapest, Hungary. I don't remember what time of day it was, but I got an email that I had gotten an offer for the USA Today summer internship. And that I got that through the Association for Women in Sports Media. They have like this whole program for women to get into the industry, and they have partnerships with companies, including USA Today. And I don't remember it that well, but I do remember being like, and they were like, you have 24 hours to tell us if you want to take the job. And I was terrified. I literally was like, wait, this is like a newspaper, like a real newspaper that covers sports. I was like, have they read what I wrote? Like, do they know? Are you sure that they like want? So I'm like using FaceTime audio because I don't have phone service in Budapest, trying to like call my parents and be like, should I take this job? And I was like texting my boyfriend, and like it was 6 hours earlier in DC, and he was like half asleep, and it was like, and I eventually just like from Prague or Budapest, I mean, it was like, yeah, like see you in the summer, I'll take it. Like, sounds great. And then fast forward a year later with the Wall Street Journal, I had a little more like confidence, but you'll find this interesting. When I did the interview for that internship, I was literally in Capital One Arena, like prepping for one of our games.
Seriously?
Like senior year. Yeah. Like,
wow.
Like Vaughn was like, can you do this? And I was like he was like, can you do this thing? And I was like, yeah. Sure. And I did it. And then I ran away to like hide in the concourse so Vaughn like couldn't see me. And I had to call this editor from the Wall Street Journal and like do this interview in my suit, waiting, 2 hours before tip off. And I like do the interview, whatever. And then I had to like email someone and let them know the editor was going to call them for a reference. And then it was like the game started, and I was like, okay, we're back to Georgetown. Like, all right, doing social. And then 2 days later, the next day I got an email from the editor saying, I'm looking forward to seeing what you can do here. And I'm like, does that mean I like got the job? And I'm like calling my parents, and I'm like, does that mean I got the job? Yeah. And they were like, and my parents are like, well, in the business world, you never know until the contract is signed. So just say thank you, looking forward to hearing back officially. And then the next day I got the official offer, and I was just like, and I was sort of like, did I really just convince them to hire me? Like, what?
Yeah, I can imagine, because Man, I remember some of your social media work, like it used to be super dope and your overlays, and when you would just be on your MacBook going crazy, and I'd be like, "Can you send that to me? Because I want to put that on my gram." Like, yo,
That's breaking news training, TJ. That's breaking social media, like covering game on social for Georgetown was breaking news. Like that's what it was. And like, yeah. So
you were awesome at it. And I was like, I want one of those. And then to this day, ladies and gentlemen, here's an insight from me. Amanda is the individual that took that legendary defense thing that everybody was reposting and everything. Amanda's the person behind it, watching 20,000 people get up around Cavalry Read. I still get chills with that, man. So thank you, Amanda.
I was just there to capture the moment. You know, I wasn't involved in creating. I was just standing there.
It sounds good, Amanda. Come on, chill out. Listen, let's talk about something else with your prolific career. 2019, you wrote an amazing article covering a young man, a wave, a sensation known as Zion Williamson. Talk about what your thoughts was about that, because what was so crazy was, and you're right, back then, kids couldn't even, either drive or get a drink after school or, vote or whatever, but they have the biggest social media following, about to become millionaires, but they're just kids who love to play the game of basketball. Article was definitely impressionable, but I want to ask you a second point to that as well. Do you think in your heart of hearts, and I don't know where you are with this, so I'm going to ask, because I don't like it, because being a product of this, what's your stance on AAU basketball too, as well? Just curious.
Yeah. So to explain the article about Zion and all of the sort of social media youth basketball stars, obviously Zion was in college then. Mm-hmm. So I basically wrote a story diving into this culture of youth basketball players. And I'm talking about 8th graders, right? Like kids who are 14 years old, don't have a driver's license, aren't even old enough to take driver's ed. And they have like 90,000 Instagram followers, and they're getting their mixtapes made by Overtime and Slam and all of these, right. And all of these companies who literally employ people full time to fly around the country with video cameras, show up to high school basketball games, film and like make mixtapes and make money off of like literal 8th graders, right? Mm-hmm. And so the story was just about the culture of that, how it came to be, and just the fact that, everyone was freaking out about Zion having more Instagram followers than Duke itself when he showed up on campus there. Right. But really, I mean, there are 8th graders who are on that track now. He was 18 at the time, and there are kids way younger. And the kid that I spotlighted in that story, his name is Rodney Gallagher. I haven't checked in with him in a while, but he was in 8th grade, and he got his first, I believe it was his first verbal offer to join a basketball program when I was reporting the story at Illinois, and he's in 8th grade. And since then, like I follow him on Instagram, he's gotten so many. I think he's even gotten some to play football. I don't know, but it's like these kids are like amazing. And but they're also business minded because they know that their brand is going to help them in life, whether they play basketball or not. As for my opinion on AAU, I mean, I'm not really like an expert on it. What I will say about it.
So let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Is it about the business of it, or really helping these kids get better and get them to the next level, or a little bit of both? What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I mean, I think youth sports in general has turned into like $1 million industry. And I think that especially baseball in particular, for example, is a sport that has always been expensive. And now it's even more expensive because of the way that all of the sabermetrics and like the resources, these training facilities that have popped up for young kids to use. If you don't have access to that, you just can't compete. Like, it's just like, it doesn't matter how good you are, like, right? And that's part of the reason that baseball is so white these days. But basketball and AAU basketball, I mean, these kids never used to play the same sport year round and travel. Right. And now they do. And yes, it's an industry. Clearly some of the kids are benefiting from it, but look, where there is money, capitalism will find it. And that's what the overtime league is, right?
Point. Excellent point.
The overtime league has recognized that people will pay money. I mean, look, people wanted to see LeBron James when he was in high school, like playing, they televised some of his games. So, that's not a new thing that like high school basketball, youth, and even AAU basketball, especially these days with all these NBA players' kids, right?
Right.
Is popular. But that, these companies like Overtime, they recognize that. And then the other thing Overtime recognizes is that these kids know how much they're worth.
Yes, they do.
Unlike the previous generation. And so they want to give kids a piece of that pie so that they don't revolt against them like they're revolting against the NCAA.
Gotcha. Absolutely. Before we get out of here, we had a great conversation. Time is flying when you're having fun. 2 more quick questions. The first one is, so we're now at Front Page Sports. Yay. So what's it like there? What are we doing? What's our title? What can we expect from you? What's going on?
Yeah, so I've been at Front Office Sports since end of July. Right. I'm the college sports reporter. So Front Office Sports covers the business side of the industry. So like very loosely, pretty much everything that happens off the court, which is really exciting for me because I get to write about all the important issues, right? We also have a couple arms of like email newsletters that do like daily NBA coverage and like game coverage of regular sports, but I do the business side. I write a weekly newsletter on the business of college sports. It's free, frontofficesports.com/college. You just give me your email and I give you like original reporting every week. It's a great relationship. And but like seriously, like I work really hard on it. Like this week's was all about the discrepancies and the NIL fights. And it's all original stuff. And I really enjoy what I cover. College sports is the most interesting part of sports, in my humble opinion, outside of maybe honestly like high school and AAU stuff. Yeah. And everything is changing so fast. And so like I haven't slept much in the past week and a half because March Madness and there's all this sort of business stuff happening that I'm covering. But that's kind of what I do. And we have some other cool projects in the works for over the summer. But yeah, I mean, I just, I'm in all the press conferences. I'm, doing all my own interviews. It's all original reporting. So.
Absolutely. So listen, let me ask this final question for you. If you could pick 5 sports interviews all time that you would want to say, Oh
God.
I gave you 5 opportunities to sit down with anybody you wanted to in sports. Or we could do popular world, whatever. I'll do it like that. Give me 5 interviews that you could do as a journalist. Any 5. Anybody.
Well, the first one, perhaps maybe not like a dream. It is a dream interview, but maybe it is possible, is Sarah Fuller, the first woman to score in a Power 5 football game. I've written about her, but I've never talked to her. And I just, women playing women's sports is incredible. But women playing men's sports is also sort of like its own weird beast. And that I personally related to, obviously. So I'd love to talk to her. Oh God. Growing up, I was a huge I was a Yankee fan. Okay. And for whatever reason, I just really loved Bernie Williams.
Captain. Okay.
He because of the music, I was into music growing up, like because of the musical aspects, just like his persona, like as a young, 5 years old, I just loved him. So, I don't hear from him much. Nobody hears from him much. I would love to know what he's up to. Oh God, this is so hard because now I have to really putting me on the spot, TJ.
I'm sorry, Amanda.
No, it's all good. I'm good.
I'm trying to do my journalist job here.
I know, and you're asking these such great questions.
Thank you.
Who else would I just give anything to talk to? It's this, and the other reason this question is hard for me is because I'm so deep into college sports right now that I'm just like, it's like all college sports people coming to my mind.
That's cool.
But honestly, so like another one that is current, and again, maybe I can get this to happen, but I really want to talk to the guy behind all of these NIL protests, Geo Baker. He's the Rutgers guard. I've never spoken with him. And the way that these athletes are speaking their minds, the way that they're organizing in a way that literally professionals like can't even do all the time, just so impressive. And I just like really want to meet him and talk to him about everything that he has been through in the past 4 years, and where he wants to take his career next.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I'm really like digging into like my childhood, like who I want to talk to.
Just two more. Two more. You got me.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna like come up with 50 of them after we get off this call. Another one I really, another person that really means a lot to me that we were thinking of maybe trying to interview is Kim Ang, who's the general manager of the Marlins. She's the first Asian woman to be a general manager.
Yep, woman of Asian descent. Yep, that's cool.
So she, again, obvious reasons, baseball, just really would love to speak with her.
One more. Come on, Amanda. You got me.
Yeah, I know. It's just like, all right, I'm going to give you a hometown one.
Okay.
I never like got to interview John Thompson.
You never got to talk to big coach?
I mean, like I like had met him, right? Like working, but I never as a journalist.
Yeah, I got you.
Interviewed him.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So
yeah.
that's number 5.
I'm gonna say this: when I started hosting, not maybe my first or second year, but by your senior year, my father came down to a game. He's like, "Listen, I don't care what you got to do to get me down there, but I got to talk to big coach before I leave here. I'm not driving back home. Like, yeah, you're my son. It was great. It's cool. I got to talk to big coach." I'm like, "Well, did you come to see your son, or did you manipulate the situation, Dad?" Anyway, don't answer that, Dad. I know you're watching. Anyway, listen, it's been so good to, number 1, see you. Number 2, talk to you. And I wish you so much success moving forward. I'm going to send my email address because I want to see what you're doing and keep in contact. But listen,
same to you.
Tell everybody one more time where they can catch you at, what you got going on, and let us all know. Go ahead, say it one more time. So free advertisement. Go ahead.
All right. You can find my work at frontofficesports.com/college. And my Twitter handle, because like I'm getting a few followers these days, is just A Christovich with an extra H at the end.
All right. Well, Madam Amanda Christovich, we thank you so much for being a part of the Stoop. This was a great episode. Thank you for all your insight. And we know you're going to keep crushing it. And as one of my angels, I love you. It's been an excellent
time. All right. It's been great to talk to you, TJ.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, it's another great episode of the Stoop. We'll catch you soon. Take care.